The Castlevania franchise has been popular ever since its debut title hit store shelves back in 1986. Its gameplay and setting really struck a chord with audiences and became an instant classic that inspired a number of sequels and remakes over the years. From there, the lore expanded and many characters were added to its world. Then in March of '97, we were presented with a Castlevania game that changed the standard formula. We were given a more exploratory adventure with a lot of emphasis on RPG elements like the Legend of Zelda games. It was quite a deviation for the franchise, but this game would influence the making of almost all future Castlevanias to come after it. This was Castlevania Symphony of the Night for the original PlayStation. The game received critical acclaim from all over and climbed its way to the top as the best-selling Castlevania game to this day. I didn't come around to playing this one until a few years ago while I was on a Castlevania binge. I grew up playing Super Castlevania 4 on SNES, which I loved and revisited quite often. Then I started playing the NES games because I wanted more of that experience. Next thing I knew, I was getting deeper into the franchise with games like Rondo of Blood for the TurboGrafx-16 and Order of Ecclesia on the DS, which I never finished, but I plan to get back to that someday. And I'm glad I got that one before the random price increase. Like, where did that come from? Anyways, I eventually downloaded Symphony of the Night on my PS3 because it was relatively cheap and I had heard it was a pretty good game. And what I got out of it was a Castlevania experience like I had never had before. As a kid, it's pretty easy to lose track of time when playing video games because of having no responsibilities. As you get older, stuff gets in the way and you tend to play in moderation. You know, like playing games knowing you have to go to work in the next 5 minutes. However, that did not matter when I played Symphony of the Night for the first time. That childlike wonder was brought back into my life. I would just get completely lost in Dracula's castle and hours would go by without me even noticing. The atmosphere was so captivating, and the freedom to explore wherever my heart desired made me want to uncover as much of the map as I could. Well, every now and then I would get snapped out of my trance whenever the cutscenes came up.
Die, monster! You don't belong in this world!
I've come to destroy this castle.
Then we have the same purpose.
I'll take you to a place which might be interesting for you.
You know, Alucard's voice actor isn't too bad, but everyone else just sounds awkward. But these are definitely the funniest parts of the game, which obviously isn't meant to be humorous, but how could you not laugh after hearing this?
Magnificent! But now feel my unbridled wrath!
Wrath? Are you sure? You sound a little confused there. It's more like unbridled boredom. Now, the thing with Symphony of the Night is that it's the first game to coin the term Metroidvania. It shares a lot of similarities with the Metroid games when it comes to things like getting upgrades to open new areas of the map and having dedicated rooms for saving your progress. It's very similar to Super Metroid especially, and together these two games became some of the greatest titles of their respective times. What Symphony of the Night has to offer is a lot of extra content. There's more upgrades, bosses, and it's a bigger game in general, albeit only because of the inverted castle that appears halfway through the game. And I'll agree that it was a lazy way of extending the game, and having the castle being upside down puts a complete halt on the smooth traveling you're able to do in the beginning. More on that later, but now let's get into the story. Symphony of the Night takes place in the Transylvanian countryside of Romania in the year 1797. It picks up right after the end of Rondo of Blood, to the point where the first stage is the final boss fight from that game. 4 years have passed, and Dracula's castle has appeared once again, and Richter Belmont has been possessed. You play as Alucard, the half-human son of Dracula, whose mission it is to stop his father, who wants revenge on humans for killing his wife, who they believed was a witch. Oh yeah, and Maria's back from Rondo too. To get the true ending, you have to seek out certain items to find out what's possessing Richter, which turns out to be the work of the priest Shaft. Afterward, a second castle emerges, and the new objective is to collect the parts of Vlad being held by certain bosses, to open the final door and confront Dracula himself. You can see it's still a standard Castlevania plotline where Dracula is the main threat, but the spin of playing as someone other than a Belmont is a fresh and welcoming experience. Alucard is way more versatile than any other playable Castlevania protagonist in the past, and it really shows. He doesn't have item crashes like the Belmonts do, but he's able to use spells, transformations, familiars, sub-weapons, and other secret abilities you'll discover. One of the best being the Shield Rod spells. The Shield Rod is a weapon you can find in Symphony of the Night, and when paired with certain shields, it can unleash spells that can boost Alucard's stats or release a large-scale magic attack. The most broken of these magics comes from combining the rod with the Alucard shield. Dear God, you literally steamroll over everything with this magic. Not even bosses can protect themselves from its power. Symphony of the Night actually has a lot of overpowered weapons in it, and the game's not that difficult, at least in the second half. The first castle is more focused on the leveling up and progression, while the second castle is pretty much a free playground. You can collect the pieces of Vlad in any order you want, because at this point you'll have most, if not all, necessary power-ups used for travel. I mean, it is difficult at first getting through the clock tower area, but then you start getting the really good weapons and leveling up becomes faster, completely destroying the pace from before. But this isn't a bad thing. This is probably where I spent most of my first playthrough because I could explore every inch of the map without being stopped by mandatory objectives I needed to complete in order to keep moving forward. Finding new items is fun too, especially if you manage to grab a rare weapon like the Chrysogrim, arguably the best sword in the game. During my playthrough, I didn't really need the Chrysogrim because I had the Alucard shield, but I wanted to try and get it to show off its power. Unfortunately, I didn't have any items on me to increase my luck, which would raise the chances of getting a rare drop, and I spent an hour killing the same enemy trying to get this sword and nothing happened. But on the flip side, I was able to level up my sword familiar so high that it, combined with my shield, made me virtually unstoppable. The game also has a lot of different healing items and stat boosts, but I honestly never really used any of them. The healing items you find scattered around the castle are pretty abysmal compared to the potions you could just buy at the library. There, you can also buy other armors and weapons for your arsenal, and it even has some cool extra features in it, like a sound test and bestiary of all the monsters in the game. And speaking of sound, the music in this game is a real treat, and it really contributes to the game's immersion. Its tracks vary from many different types of music, like the gothic rock we're all used to in Castlevania, to even jazz and a constant theme of metal music as well. It's all very fitting, and I'm glad the tracks aren't recycled from the first castle into the second one. However, there are a few places in the inverted castle that do have the same music, which can make it feel very plain at some points. But all in all, the music is awesome, and I listen to it while working on projects all the time. Going back to the library, I always loved it when games had an encyclopedia of their enemies in it. I always find them interesting to read through, and it's nice to shed some light on the minor characters. It shows all their stats and names, and even short descriptions of their attacks, designs, or purpose. Some of them are more descriptive than others, and some are just oddly funny. For example, Death, the penultimate boss of the game and frequent Castlevania antagonist, is listed as Dracula's close friend. Like, what? The floating one-off phantom skulls have a scarier description than Death, his close friend, not his servant of darkness. No, these guys are bros. Like, what do they even do together? Do they go grab a cold one with the boys at the bar? Do they enjoy a game of tennis every now and then? I wonder how Shaft feels about all this. I mean, he's the one that's always there doing stuff for Dracula. Let it be known that demonic creatures in medieval Transylvania have to deal with friendship triangles. Going back to the enemies in Symphony of the Night, they're mostly the monsters of mythology we're all used to seeing, but there are quite a few unique baddies in the bunch. There's a few references here and there, like with the Lion, Tin Man, and Scarecrow enemies being a reference to the Wizard of Oz. And there are some funny ones too, like the Were skeleton here. He looks like he's got some serious attitude going on with that hands-on-hips neck swing approach. Get on up! I think my favorites are the skeletons that run away when you kill the giant skulls they carry, and the skeleton dancers who just kinda jump at you without thinking about a landing plan. And then there's the bosses in this game, who are your standard Castlevania monsters, but they look amazing. I like all of the big, creepy moving monsters, and it's nice to see some old favorites of mine like Gaibon and Slagra from Super Castlevania 4. This game does a good job of making legit scary bosses like the amalgamation of human bodies that is Legion, and the most horrifying one in my opinion, Beelzebub. It's just disgusting, the rotting corpse falling to pieces and the... I can't stand giant flies, man, they're disgusting and... ugh. Another interesting thing with the bosses is that some of them from the first castle become normal enemies in the second castle. It's an awesome way to give the player a sense of progression, and it's satisfying to beat them now after a tougher encounter earlier on. When you finally get the pieces of Vlad and confront Dracula in the reverse castle, you fight him in a new form, which is really cool to see. Again, it's too bad that you're pretty much unstoppable at this point, and he becomes somewhat of a pushover.
For what profit is it to a man if he gains the world and loses his own soul?
Is he reciting Bible verses? Even Alucard's like, what? We must have hit him in the head pretty hard. After the battle is over, Dracula is defeated and Alucard, Richter, and Maria leave the castle. Alucard will leave saying the world is better off without him, but depending on your percentage, Maria will either leave with Richter or follow him at the end. It's not that significant of a difference for the ending, so I say finish it however you please. As for extra content, you can play as Richter after beating the game once. It becomes just like any other classic Castlevania game since he can't use any weapons like Alucard. But damn did they give him some killer moves. If you're good enough, he could just blast through both of the castles in no time. Although he does die very easily. I wanted to see if I could make it to the end of the game with him, and I only got maybe a bit more than half the way there, skipping everything you had to do if you played as Alucard. I think I'd rather just stick with Alucard, but it's a nice bonus in a game that's already bursting at the seams with content and secrets. There's still plenty of health upgrades, cool weapons to uncover, and hidden rooms in both castles. And I haven't uncovered everything for myself, but it's always nice to go through again and see what else I can find on a new run. And that's pretty much why I keep coming back to this game. There's just so much in it, and I highly recommend it to anyone who hasn't played it before. And that's Castlevania Symphony of the Night. With that, I want to thank you guys for checking out this video, and if you'd like to see more, hit subscribe, leave a like, and ring the bell to get notified for my next upload. Alright guys, peace.